Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Matt Prehm and Erik Skopil on the show today. It's a Monday after a football game. Happy Labor Day weekend to all of you. Oregon did not look good in their 24-14 victory. And naturally, the result, the outcome, the path to that outcome is going to be the heavy topic of this Monday mailbag as we open up the questions. And Erik and I were just talking about it off air, and a bunch of questions, which is awesome. Thank you for submitting them. And then two, it's a lot on the offense of what happened. And there's a lot of concern here from the fan base.
And I think the concern is earned. It's
Yes.
obviously right at the beginning of the season here. I did write a story on Sunday on Duck Territory saying, you can adjust expectations if you want, but I don't think you can draw too many major conclusions about a team after one game. And I kind of pointed to the fact that you look back to a couple of these last few seasons, and whether it would be losing to Auburn in the season opener and then playing and winning a Rose Bowl, or whether it would be the Fresno State win, I should say, and then put a disappointing kind of weird win kind of like this, and then beating Ohio State the next week in Columbus. So don't judge too much into it, but there are concerns, and we want to get into those absolutely right now. With a question from @DuckFly08. Do we think the Ducks still have a decent shot to run the table or win the conference if they figure out the O-line problems? Thanks. #Autzen Audibles. If they figure out the O-line stuff, I think this team's pretty dang good. There weren't a lot of other things that I thought were unrelated to the O-line play. Like we talked about it a little on Saturday, Matt, with Jared after the game of, there's probably more vertical passing success if the offensive line plays better. Maybe that allows the safeties have to be moved in for the opposing defense. That allows you to run the ball a little better. That allows you to beat them over the top a little more. All these sorts of things kind of work together. If you can pass protect longer, maybe that allows some of those deep vertical passes to develop. So I think with better O-line play, this team can definitely do a lot. The question is, how fixable is that? And that's going to be a thing we talk about in a moment here. But I don't know, Matt, for you, did you we both predicted they'd go 12-0 this year, we should say. How are we feeling about those predictions coming out of week one? I guess is maybe a decent way to answer this question.
I mean, for me, I'm less confident in that selection of Oregon being a 12-0 team. I still believe they can get there. I still believe that they can be that team, but it's going to be harder now. But what I think what the saving grace for me here is how bad the offense was doesn't change the fact that the defense was really good. And how bad the offense was doesn't change the fact that the depth of the defense showed out. And you can be an elite team and lean on the defense. And maybe that's what the story is going to be for Oregon 2024, where their defense carries the torch and the offense just picks up. I don't know, but I would be lying if I'm like, oh yeah, everything's good. They're gonna go 12-0. If I had to make an adjustment, I would probably say week one overreaction. They're probably gonna lose a game now. I would probably say 11-1 now. Minnesota, the Michigan game on the road, obviously the Ohio State game. Those are two games that loom large. But I want to reserve judgment from an overarching freak out of let's see what they look like in week two. Because as you pointed out, they struggled against Fresno State, and then they went and beat Ohio State. And it goes to other seasons too. There was I think a 2009 team at Oregon that didn't score in the first half at Boise, and then I don't even think they got a first down against Boise in the first half. They lost that game, obviously. Then they went to Purdue and delivered a clunker there and barely won. And then 2 weeks later, they destroyed a number 6 Cal team 38-3 or something like that. We'll see what happens. Week two, we'll learn a lot about this team. Week 4 or game 4, we'll learn a lot about this team as well of the jumps that they've taken. And that's probably what we're going to have to judge here. But the reality is they're not as good as we expected them to be coming out of the chute, and that's a little bit of a concern.
It's definitely it's a major concern, and I would echo a lot of what you said in terms of when you pick a team to go 12-0, you expect the game out of the gate against an FCS team to go like it went last year against Portland State. We were talking about that in our preview show of like, well, Oregon won that game 81-7. It was 50-7 at half. This is what you expect for a team that is picked third in the country in the preseason poll, is a kind of a national championship dark horse pick. Like this is what you would expect, and yet it was 24-14. And to get kind of more broad before we jump to the second one, which gets kind of more into this, but like if the offensive line plays bad, Michigan has probably the two best interior defensive linemen in the country. Ohio State has a bunch of incredibly talented guys, especially coming off the edge. And I would have told you coming into the game that I thought the tackles were ready for a matchup like that. And that was part of the reason I had confidence against Ohio State. I didn't think either of those guys played particularly well. And we should note maybe some of this is you got a left-handed quarterback. Responsibilities are flipped here. Johnny's now the blindside blocker. Does that matter that much? I don't know, but maybe that played a role of some sort in terms of how they're, maybe some growing pains early. But, again, if you want to get into, running the table, winning the conference, well, you got to be better in the trenches because there's two teams on the schedule that are about as good as anybody in the country up there. And if you play the way you played on Saturday against those teams, you're not going to give yourself much of a shot at all to have success. All right, second one kind of gets right to this issue from @KyleFuller90. Do you see the offensive line improving, or is this something to be concerned for the rest of the season? Thank you, Kyle, for the question. Appreciate it. I wish I had a clearer answer. Here's what I would say is this is not going to be the five I think they start all the way. I think pretty clearly whenever Matthew Bedford is ready, you're throwing him in that lineup. I almost don't care because it's like that was so brutal. You've got to tell me this guy's better. And if he's not better,
oh boy,
you've got problems the rest of the season. That's for sure.
I laugh a little bit. And look, I understand it's the message board. I understand it's the internet. It's the world of overreactions. It's the world of freaking outs. But I laughed a little bit about the narrative that like Alik Terry is suddenly this horrible offensive line coach. Johnny Cornelius suddenly is this horrible offensive tackle. Poncho was not good and he needs to be replaced. And the reality is probably if they had like a viable option behind those guys week one, we probably would have seen someone rotate in and be given a chance. And that really didn't happen. But the true reality is these guys aren't bad. Alik Terry isn't an awful offensive line coach. The narrative that he is in a world of hurt and that Oregon's in a position of weakness is not true. Because you're just devaluing everything that happened last season based off of one game. Oregon's offensive line was unbelievable. We aren't the ones that were out here saying Johnny Cornelius was going to be an early round NFL draft pick. Like we've repeated those motions. We agree with those ideas, but NFL scouts, media outlets that their sole focus is the NFL draft are the ones coming out and saying that. Like Johnny Cornelius just all of a sudden didn't forget, how to play the offensive line position. He just had a bad day, and it was unfortunate for him. It was a really bad day. Poncho had a really bad game at right guard. So I expect, I would assume that the offensive line is going to be drastically better from week one to game 4. I would expect a jump, but I agree with you that Bedford, whenever he is healthy, and it might be week 2, it might be a case of we were hoping to maybe ease you into things and maybe we rest you for the Boise State game just to be extra cautious and extra, careful, and you play a game and then you get a natural bye week right after it in case there's any long lingering, rehab issues with your return. If he's ready to play this week, he's put into the lineup and you need his presence there. And it's funny, we talked about Eric, like, I don't know if it's going to be a Charlie Pickard getting immediately bumped out of the starting lineup ahead of the Idaho game. Now it becomes it's Pickard or Poncho. One of those two guys, they're not in the lineup. Bedford's there. Like it was clearly visible that what you had available and what you played with against Idaho at center and right guard, and the communication between right guard and right tackle was not good enough. And Bedford assumes his job, and now it's Poncho and Pickard. Like, you're gonna have to pick who's the better one. And I don't know if either guy really stood above the other one drastically.
And here's where it becomes difficult to tell you what the solutions are, and why, thankfully, Leek Terry is a much better offensive line coach than either of us or any of those watching. It is assessing, like, a lot of the pre-snap stuff. Again, I go back to that Dylan quote post game of, how was your communication with Charlie? Oh, it was solid, and then rattles off a bunch of stuff that didn't go well. And so, how much of that is Charlie being, maybe not adept there? How much of that is Dylan himself struggling? Because one of the things that was beneficial for, like, JPJ last year and then Poncho in the bowl game was you're working with Bo Nix, who had a full year in the system, who knew all this stuff, was already really advanced in those areas. It's possible this isn't quite as one of his strengths. This is maybe not something he's quite as good at as Bo. I mean, that doesn't mean it's a shot, because Bo was, I thought, really excellent in that area in terms of just, this guy's his dad was a collegiate offensive coordinator turned high school football head coach, and was somebody who grew up around offenses and understanding defenses. Maybe that's not something Dylan's quite as adept at. So you're dealing with maybe two parties that are doing this for the first time together, but maybe also not used to doing it quite to get, at this high of a level either. So that's part of it for me, is assessing some of that. And then the next question is, well, would Poncho be better? And I don't have an answer for that question. So based off of purely the performance on Saturday, I thought Charlie played pretty well, actually. And I would say Charlie played better than Poncho. I don't know if that means that they'll simply remove Poncho and put in Bedford, because they might have a very different assessment of who played better between those two. And they might tell you, actually, Charlie was a liability out there in terms of the pre-snap stuff. Sure, the snaps were better, but we think Poncho can do a better job there, and so we'll move him back to center and take out Bedford. I don't have answers to those questions, and again, I'm not an O-line expert here, but from what I saw, like, it felt like Pickard probably outplayed, just from post-snap perspective, Poncho in this game.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. The one thing that I'm curious to learn with Dan on Monday night tonight, and to be honest with you, I don't know if we're going to get these answers because it's in season now, and Dan turns into a different interview during the season. But did the pre-snap calls, did the pre-checks, did all of that work under Pickard? Were there misses here? We don't know, and I'll be curious to find that out. Like, how did that pre-snap, acknowledgement and adjustments happen, and how did they grade out? Did they make the right calls? Maybe these sacks happened, and I'm not trying to just bash on Charlie Pickard here for a second, but just hypothetical, like, maybe the stuff on the right side with Pickard and Poncho and Cornelius, the sacks all came on the right side. Maybe it was the wrong calls or the wrong checks that were made by the center that led to those plays happening. I don't know.
Right.
It could very much well be those Poncho and Ajani just played horrible, and their execution on those plays that resulted in sacks. But that's what I'll be curious to find out with Dan on Monday night.
Right. And again, that's the great unknown for us, not knowing all of these small minutia points of, like, and again, I'm not saying there's a lot of people who do know outside of those in around the football program, but that to me is going to be a big decision maker in terms of how they want to restructure this. And honestly, if you were to tell me that the center, like Pickard, was actually doing a great job there, and this was all unrelated to him, that might almost make you feel better about the long term. At least you feel like you have a center who can get the ball back there and can identify what's going on pre-snap. And I thought he held up pretty well in terms of what happened after the snap too. So certainly something we'll be talking about the rest of the week. And thank you, Kyle, for the question. All right. Third one from @TakeItCheesy. How large of a score differential do you need to see against Boise State to reaffirm the preseason hype and aspirations for this year's team? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. I thought this was a good way to kind of switch gears a little bit and look ahead to this weekend. And we'll do a lot more Boise State related content as the week goes on. I think we will do a podcast talking more about just kind of what they are, what some players to know, how they play the game, et cetera, as we get closer here. But to this specific question, and even before we quite answer that, like, Matt, this is a huge game for me in terms of not just for them to reaffirm their hype, but for like us to reaffirm like our confidence in this team. Back to that first question of like, can they run the table, compete for a Big Ten championship game? Well, if they lose this game, or it's a game that comes right down to the final possession, my concerns won't change a lot, especially if it's the same issues, if it's still offensive line play related and it's still a run game can't get going and they can't throw the ball down the field. Even in a win, I will feel like, oh boy, I guess Ohio State's still a month away, but I don't feel very confident now about that game. In terms of like the external hype, I don't know. I think the spread's 18.5 this morning. I saw.
Yes, I looked right now. It's 18.5. It's a 3-score game for Oregon.
I think you got to at least cover the spread. I mean, I think you got to win 21, 24 points, maybe something like that, to feel like you come out going, hey, there was a decisive win over a Boise State team, which, mind you, had its own issues in its opener. I know Ashton Jeanty scored like 6 touchdowns, but they gave up a lot of points. I think over 40 points to Georgia Southern in that game. But it's still a Boise State team that is looked at as the favorite to win its conference, to possibly be one of the, to be that at-large team from the Group of 5 level. So this is a marquee early game for Oregon in its non-con, and I think you have to win decisively to kind of quiet some of the noise. Because if it's 24-14 again, there's going to start being a lot more chatter, and we don't know what's going to happen in the polls because those don't come out, I think, till Tuesday this week. I expect Oregon will probably drop a little bit. I would imagine if it's another really close game and everything's even around the country, a couple other teams are going to jump them if that were the case.
13.4 yards per carry for Ashton Jeanty against Georgia Southern. 6 total touchdowns, 267 yards. I mean, unbelievable performance by a junior running back, All-American candidate, and someone that Oregon, he might be probably a top 3 running back Oregon faces.
Definitely. Season. Yeah. He'll be one of the top 3 along with the Ohio State guys.
Yes. And I don't know what the number is going to be in terms of feeling confident that Oregon is at the level that they should be at. I mean, obviously maybe the easy answer is, yeah, like what you said, cover the spread, 18.5. But like sometimes you see performances where it's like, hey, this guy is just so good that you just need to just weather the storm. Like I remember watching Reggie Bush, and obviously that Oregon team was outnumbered against that USC team, but it didn't matter how good Oregon's defense was in that game against Reggie Bush. Like he was going to be unstoppable. I remember watching Gronk at Arizona in I think it was like 2008 at Autzen Stadium. Like that was a game where it was just like, you just have to get past this game, survive in advance. It doesn't matter. Gronk was just unstoppable for that Arizona team. And Mike Williams, the receiver at USC, those types of performances happen where it's just like, holy shit, you just survive. And if Ashton Jeanty shows up against Oregon next week and is unbelievably unstoppable and is just pulling off crazy runs, and Oregon's in position to get stops, and somehow he spurts out and gets 12 yards or 15 yards and he rips off a crazy touchdown. But Oregon's offense is always a step ahead. It's always like, hey, you guys have to pull a rabbit out of your hat every single drive just to stay within a puncher's chance of us. And Oregon wins that game, like, I'm just hypothetical here, like 49 to 35. Like, they didn't cover the spread. They gave up a bunch of points. But I would look at it as like, hey, Oregon's offense figured things out. They moved the ball effectively. They scored the ball. They were always one step ahead of Boise. And then Oregon just played maybe one of the best running backs, one of the best players in college football, and he went nuts. That happens. And it would be a little disappointing that they gave up that many points, but I would walk away feeling like defense will get right. They're not going to play that caliber of a running back every single week. And the bigger story here is the offense fixed themselves. So I can walk away from this upcoming game if it's close, but it's the nature of how it's close, why it's close. Does Oregon have to come all the way back in the second half and put together basically like 4 perfect drives to make a comeback and get the win? That would be a concern to me. But if Oregon shows up out of the gate, they score on their first drive or X number of straight drives in a row, and Boise State just always, for whatever reason, just stays within a puncher's chance, like I walk away with that clean. But maybe the long answer and being turned into a short one is cover the spread. You've got to be able to score more than 24 points. Like I would be more disappointed if they only scored 27 points in this game and they won by 18. If it was 27-9, like I would be more disappointed than Oregon coming out and winning 42-24. Like that wouldn't be an issue for me.
I think it's a good reframing of the question, because it almost should be based upon what we've seen. How many points forced would we like to see to feel comfortable about this offense, right? Because that's
more than 30.
Yeah, I know. I think 30 would be probably the low end of the threshold there. I mean, this was an offense a year ago that averaged 44 points per game. And I know that's not attainable. I don't think anybody thought they'd come out and replicate that, especially because defensively they're playing some better teams. But, if this is a team after 2 weeks and they played Idaho and Boise State and they're averaging 27 points per game and they're 2-0, you'd certainly go into Big Ten play and the Oregon State game to finish non-con play feeling like this is kind of uneasy. Like, what happened to this offense? They've got all these guys that we think are top talent, top tier talents. They've added some really high end players from the portal. Why isn't this better? So I still think cover the spread, but you're right. Like it probably does depend on how you're covering the spread, and you'd certainly feel better coming out like, okay, they scored 35 points, they scored 42 points, they scored somewhere in that range or more, and feel better. And who knows, maybe they'll have an offensive explosion. I mean, again, this was a Boise State team that had a hard time slowing down Georgia Southern. Maybe
461 yards total offense for Georgia Southern, and they had 27 first downs. And this is a team that, no offense to the Screaming Eagles of Georgia Southern, but like Oregon's offense is significantly better than on paper.
It better be.
It better be. And the talent perspective is going to be significantly better. And I would think that they can come out and they can put up some huge numbers. I mean, Georgia Southern's quarterback threw for 322 and 2 touchdowns. They didn't run the ball very well, individually performance wise, but they had their moments and they scored 45 points. Oregon should be able to have success here.
I agree. And we'll get more into that this week as we look into Boise, but yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, just to kind of close that conversation of like, it's about how much they win by, but also how many points they score.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion here on the mailbag. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. 3 questions in. We got a couple more to go, and let's keep going.
This one from another very frequent question asker, and that is @Nash_Duccaneer on X. Obviously, there were issues on offense on Saturday, but regarding the defense, I thought they looked pretty good.
Yeah.
What are some of your takeaways from watching Oregon's defense against Idaho? And then who was your defensive MVP for the game? Autzen Audibles. Thank you, Nash, for the question. I'm happy we had somebody who wanted to focus on a positive, because as you'd imagine, I think we got, a couple dozen questions, and probably 70% of them were, what's wrong with the offense? What's wrong with the offensive line? Why isn't Dylan Gabriel throwing the ball down the field? Why are these coaches still employed? The last one, maybe not too many people asked that, but there are some people thinking that. But I thought the defense, like, they played well enough to kind of like get some flowers here. I know we did, I thought, a decent job on Saturday afterwards doing a little bit of that, but now having kind of rewatched the game and having some time, I thought we would it'd be good to just kind of address this again. I think it's a really kick-ass defense. Like I'm into this. I think the thing that's interesting is two of their staple players, really three, just like barely played in this game.
Yeah.
Like Tyshim Johnson played only the second half. Jeff Bossa played, I think, 10 total snaps. Justin Jacobs played like 5 snaps. Like those are 3 guys that you're expecting to be like, would it stun you, Matt, if like those 3 guys were top 5 in tackles this year? It wouldn't, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
You could say those 3 guys are the 3 leaders in tackles this year, and you'd be like, okay, maybe that's not totally how I predict it, but adds up. Those are guys playing in the middle of the field who are known to be pretty good in making plays in space and et cetera, et cetera. And even without those 3 guys, I thought this looked great. I mean, the defensive front is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, Derek Harmon.
He was a stud.
I don't know if we talked about him quite enough, but like this was a guy when they brought him in, I was like, okay, he's going to be great on rundowns. Jamari Caldwell's strength is on pass downs. They're both great on pass downs. Jamari didn't get any sacks, but he had, I think, 2 or 3 quarterback hits, was very active in the backfield. Derek was a stud. I mean, he might be my answer for MVP.
He might be the MVP.
Yeah, I'm kind of talking. I was going to pick Mateo, but the more I'm thinking about it and having rewatched it, he was so impactful on so many different types of plays. I think Derek Harmon is as good of an interior defensive lineman Oregon has had in a minute. Like this is a really special player. I thought he was awesome. There's some great players on the outside. Like Brandon Johnson had a great game. I thought Nico Reed quietly played pretty well. I was interested that like Cam Alexander didn't play. We already knew coming in, like there are a couple guys on the injury report that were out, whether it be Jaleel Florence, Dakota Fields, or Ife Obadekwu. But they still were rotating a lot. Like Jabbar Muhammad played a ton. Dante Manning played a lot. They've got pretty good depth at corner still, even without 3 players. So like I just think in general, some of the stuff at linebacker wasn't great, but they were without their 2 top guys for most of this game. And still, I thought this was a really impressive defensive effort. And if not for a couple of trick plays, I think if you go back and chart it, like 177 of their 217 plays come from trick plays or those really well-timed screen passes. So, they basically out-schemed Oregon for when they had success, and that's credit to them. But in terms of just the players in the field, like I think this defense is really good, and if there's a reason to feel optimistic come out of week 1, it's about these guys.
Outside of 2 drives where they scored their touchdowns, they had 116 yards of offense, and they had 3 drives that ended in negative yardage. And then they had 3 more drives that ended with 2 or less yardage. So they had a drive go, and the very first drive ended with 2 total yards. They had another one that ended with just 1 total yard. And then their last drive of the game, which ended in an interception, came out with 0 total yards. Like, that's really good. I don't care who you're playing, what level of opponent that they are. Like, they did nothing multiple times. They got absolutely zilch. It was, it's our turn. Off defense, you're basically gonna get like a 90-second break here, and we're just gonna run 3 plays and then punt because we know we're not gonna get anything here. Like that's essentially what it was. I agree with Derek Harmon was the MVP of the defense. He is really good. Our good pal James Crepia of the Oregonian, like all fall camp, basically, like anytime you talk to him, would just like they've never had 2 defensive linemen that look like this. Like
he brought that he done the research, and he had this certain body type, and Oregon had 2 of them, and they had none in their program history. It was like a player over 6'3", 320 pounds or something.
Yes. And like he just all fall camp just would tell anybody about like they've never had these before. It's gonna be fun watching, whatever. And it was, and he was right. Like Harmon and Cardwell just were different dudes. And I don't want to say that they're better than Haloti Ngata or DeForest Buckner or Eric Armstead or Igor Olshansky, but like these guys, they're different, they're good, they're in that tier of they're special. And we'll see if game 1 translates to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 all the way down to whatever number they play. But that's their arch. That's their projection right now is when you have stalwarts up front, it makes everything else better. And I agree with you on Nico Reed. Like I went into the year thinking, hey, this is going to be a guy that's going to play a bunch of star. He's going to be the backup behind Brandon Johnson, and we might see him for 15 plays a game. And he lined up at star, but he also lined up at corner quite often.
Yeah. Almost exclusively outside this game.
Yes. And I felt like he was really good, and it was an improvement. And I felt like Dante Manning starting opposite Jabbar Muhammad to me was a little bit of a surprise. I think we all penciled in Cam Alexander as the starter, and to your point, like he didn't play. And is that injury, or is that maybe he's coming back from injury, or did Manning straight up beat him? I don't know.
I think if Manning had, and it's possible that two things happened. Manning could have straight out beat him, but he might also still be dealing with an injury. Because I just think if he's healthy, you'd play him a little.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, that's another name. I brought up the fact that you didn't really have Ty Sheem for this full game. Jeff and Justin weren't really out there all that much. You're right. Cam Alexander, another guy we have as a projected starter at corner, didn't play at all. Jaleel Florence, I think, who, if he'd been healthy all offseason, you'd also have him saying he was a returning starter. He started like 9 or 10 games last year. You think he could start? So this team is really deep. The fact that they were to play this way, play at that level, I know we'll get better tests going forward. And like we were just talking about how great these interior guys are. What an awesome test this week against Boise State.
Oh yeah. Like you walk into this game, like the defensive line is going to be challenged. Like that's probably the very first thing that we know Tony Tuioti is going to talk about. We know Tosh Lupoy, defensive coordinator, is going to talk about, and probably Dan. Like week one, it's they got a running back. He went for 260, 6 touchdowns. He averaged 14 yards a carry. Like even if it's half that, that's unacceptable. Like that, the gauntlet will be dropped for the defensive line going into this one. And I think maybe the most surprising was all this happened, and we've talked about it, we've mentioned it, but do you know how many plays? I think this will really cement this home. How many plays did Justin Jacobs and Jeffrey Bossa collectively play in this game?
Yeah, wasn't it 14 or 15?
It was 17 according to Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, not very many.
Collectively. That's not each. That's not one. That's both of them combined. And they did that, I know it's Idaho. I know it's an FCS opponent. They should dominate, but your two best linebackers did not play. Maybe your most important guy on defense in Bossa did not play more than 4, 5, 10 snaps. I don't know the number individually there, but can't remember. And you were stalwart. Really, really good. And look, like Betcher and Devin Jackson, they performed well, but there was enough there where you were like, if these guys we can't continue to see this week in, week out, because when they play the Ohio States, maybe it's Boise this week, like the speed there or the IQ there, it's just not the same as Bossa and Jacobs. You need to get them back.
That's a good place to kind of end the defensive talk, probably, is just that, I think it's imperative, especially going into this matchup, to have your best linebackers out there. This is a team that will run the football. This is a team that has had, obviously, a ton of success running the ball. You need your alphas out there for this one. And I imagine, based upon Dan's comments, that they're going to be pretty close to 100% this week, and certainly more guys involved than were this last game. All right, last one from @PGallagher503. Bo Nix was criticized for his checkdowns last season after the Idaho game, where most of Dylan Gabriel's passes were also checkdowns. Is this more of an aspect of Will Stein's offense versus the quarterback play? #Autzen Audibles. This was why I found it so interesting earlier in camp, Matt, that Will came out and was basically like, take the easy money, take the easy money, take the easy money. Because this is the offense. This is a large component of it is, if the defense is taking away the stuff over the top, check it down, get the ball out there. Your guys are going to be able to make plays. And, and frankly, it was a successful offensive approach in terms of the ability to actually move the ball down the field. Like that wasn't really what was the most problematic here. It was they couldn't finish any of these drives because they kept stubbing themselves on the toe, whether it was lining up illegally, whether it was giving up a strip sack, whether it was an ill-timed holding call by Poncho when it looked like Dylan maybe was going in to score. But yeah, no, this is a large component of the offense. Now, the thing is that this offense lacked some balance because they didn't throw the ball down the field really at all. I think they had one completion of more than 20 yards, and I think maybe one pass attempt all game more than that. So that part was missing. But a big part of this offense is going to be Dylan. Nothing is open downfield. You've got Jordan James 6 yards from you in the backfield. Dump it off to him. Let him go run for 5 or 6 yards, and we'll just keep the positive plays going like that. I could pull up the quote, but Will really spoke about this extensively the last time he talked to media right at the end of fall camp about just what's the biggest key for these quarterbacks is to take the easy money. Don't worry about the air yards. Get the ball out quickly. Get the ball accurate. I think he said it's not rocket science, and everybody confuses this with all this BS about how many yards downfield you're throwing. We want those easy completions. So to answer the question, yeah, this is a big part of Will Stein's offense.
I think I would love to go back and look at the numbers. Whittington and Jordan James collectively caught 8 passes for quick math, 72 yards in this game. Mm-hmm. I would love to know when Oregon's 2 starting running backs caught more than 8 passes in a football game.
I'll take a look.
It was a lot. And it was weird. It was also a weird deal where you brought up how Stein talked about it. Dylan talked about it. Dante Moore, the backup quarterback, talked about it. Take the easy money. Take the easy money. We knew it was coming. We knew it was coming. And yet after the game was over, we were like, that didn't look really good. It was just a whole bunch of checkdowns. Is this really what the offense is going to be about? I think what the difference between last year's version of the offense and this year's version of the offense was Bo took a lot of checkdowns. He took a lot of easy plays. He took a lot of the 5-yard outs from the safety valve tight end or the receiver or whatnot. Those plays were always happening for Oregon last season, but there was always going to be the sprinkle in of 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 deep shots down the field. And those plays just didn't happen week 1. And so you got the normal checkdowns, but then you only got really 2 deep shots that they took all game. One to Kyle Casper, which was which was caught. And then the other one was to Evan Stewart, the first drive of the game in the end zone, which was almost there, almost a catch. Outside of that, though, they didn't really try. And I don't know if that was because of Idaho. I don't know if that was because of Dylan not seeing things. I don't know if that was because of play call and they were just, dinking and dunking, what have you. I don't know. But I think the bigger thing for me is there were opportunities where if he had just kept the ball and ran, the first down would have been had, or a big gain would have been had, which would have pulled in more people to the line of scrimmage because of his threat to run the football, opening up the passing game. Dan was asked about it, and he said something along the lines of there's always value in running the quarterback, but there's always a risk taking with the injury, and we don't want to be running him a bunch every single game, and that is true, and I 100% agree with that. But you look at last year, Bo ran 9 times for 46 yards against Tech, two times for 14 yards against Hawaii, 5 for 9 and a touchdown against Colorado, 3 for 18, Stanford, and down the list. He still ran the ball. There were still opportunities where even if it was 2 times for 12 yards, but he probably got first downs on those run plays. Or he snuck one for a first down or something like that. He did have a game against Portland State, 0 rushing attempts, 0 yards. And maybe that's the FCS game. It's not worth it. Don't take the risk. Maybe that was the same thing that happened with Gabriel. Whatever you do, do not run the football at all costs. Maybe that was told to Dylan. I don't know. But when you combine the fact of checkdowns, no runs, and no real deep shots, it does create this boy, is this really what the offense is going to be like? I don't think it's going to be that way, but I can understand how people look at it.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it on the running part at the end there, where I think this might just be FCS competition. Let's just not risk it.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious because we know, like, I predicted Dylan would run for like over 400 yards this year, just because we know from his time at Oklahoma, this is a component of the game that's there. There were no RPOs that I really remember, and I think that's going to be a component of the offense. I think that might be let's not get him hurt against an FCS team. Let's also not put too much on tape before we play Boise. I think there's probably some of that. The lack of vertical passing game is a thing that concerns me. I'm fine with dumping it off to the running backs if they're going to get 9 yards per catch, which is what they average, right? Eight completions for 72 yards. Like, you take that. I mean, I was just looking through it last year. Bucky caught 56 passes on the season, and had more than 5 catches 5 times. So, I don't know if that part's too different. I think really what it comes down to is if you were to look at it and go, okay, the games that Bucky has 5 catches, I bet you there were 5 passes that were at least 15 to 20 yards down the field attempted in the game, probably more than that. So that's the part that feels missing. Is I'm not too bothered by check downs as long as they're going for positive games. I'm not too bothered by the quarterback not running in against an FCS team because you don't want to get hurt or you don't want to put too much out there, et cetera, et cetera. My bigger concern is just like not only the inability to complete a deep pass, but like to not really try after the first couple of drives.
Really weird.
That just kind of makes you a little uncomfortable. And this is why I think you're seeing people compare this offense to like Mario Cristobal era, which we'll see if that, I don't think that's going to be what we're talking about for the rest of the season, but I get it. If you're going like, all we did was run and throw passes 1 yard over the line of scrimmage the whole game. We never threw it down the field, while you're going like, well, that was kind of boring and not very fun. Where's this offense that a year ago averaged, like almost 600 yards per game and 44 points.
And I think I'm putting a lot of faith that what we saw week 1 was a very vanilla, very toned back game plan. Not that they weren't going to take shots, but they probably had a very select few plays that they installed for the game prep for that week. Hey, let's keep everything else under wraps. Let's not show a bunch. We're just going to be very simple here and take the stuff. And you combine the fact that they played cloud coverage, as Dylan called it, 2 safeties over the top. Like, Idaho clearly said, like, you're not going over the top. You're not taking deep shots. We're going to make it really hard. And the bigger concern for me is they couldn't run the football when that was the case. Like, as much as I know we're talking about the offense and the dump in the passing game, but like, Idaho's defense was geared towards, hey, we want you to short pass game and we want running the football. And Oregon, they couldn't run the ball and effectively. Jordan James had 95 yards and 6 yards a carry and a touchdown, but Whittington was under 3. Sadiq was under 3. They had some sacks. And Jordan's runs, like, to be honest with you, like, outside of maybe 1 or 2, a lot of it was hard running. It was him making guys miss and finding a hole and creating a hole to get 4 or 5, 6 yards.
Yeah, just the last thing on the offense, I guess, is I thought Jordan played pretty well in that game, to be honest, having gone back and rewatched it. Yeah. They weren't, as you said, empty yardage. Like, there were times where he was hit really early and had to squirt through it to get 5 or 6 yards. But 17 for 95, the touchdown, 4 catches, 40. That's a very solid debut as the primary running back. And I'm to your point, I'm more concerned about why is Noah Whittington averaging what he averaged, because at times he looked okay when he got in the open field. He just really had a hard time getting going in terms of finding the holes. Maybe that's just like an acceleration thing. Maybe that's the offensive line just, bad luck for him, was unable to kind of, get on their blocks on plays where he was the running back. But, those guys touched it roughly the same number of times. And Jordan, finished with like almost 100 more yards or something from scrimmage when you look at it. So it was pretty stark difference between those two when they had to kick the ball. And again, not a third running back entered. We didn't see, I think we saw Jaden briefly, but we didn't see Jay Harris at all. We didn't see Dwan Riggs at all. So I'll be curious to see, like, they talked about playing 3 or 4 guys. We really only saw 2.
Saw a fullback multiple times.
We did see a fullback, Zach Grace, great fullback. Honestly, that touchdown that Jordan had,
Yeah,
he owes that to 44, a walk-on redshirt freshman fullback, Zach Grace. Yeah, that was great.
fullback is back at the University of Oregon officially. That's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles Mailbag. Thank you for submitting your questions. We've got a Wednesday or Tuesday show. We'll recap everything Dan said Tuesday night, plus some interviews, recaps with players. And then Wednesday, we're slated to have BJ Rains, Boise State beat reporter, insider for the program. He will be on the podcast. Thursday, we'll have our prediction show. And then by that time, after you listen to that, it's game time, baby. We are full on game week. Games will come fast and furious. I hope you guys have a good Labor Day weekend. And until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.